EVs are often touted as smartphones on wheels because of their lots of high-tech amenities inside. So much so that many Malaysians actually don't prefer them because it's too high-techy for them. Well, most of them actually prefer just a simple, no fuss, no hassle car that can get them from point A to point B that just so happens to run on electric. Okay, reading those bits, and I certainly think that the BYD Atto 2 here fits those bills perfectly because it's quite an affordable car at just 100,000 ringgit. But once I delved deeper into the supposed entry-level EV SUV, I found this thing to be quite interesting and certainly one of the best, if not the best product BYD Cars Malaysia has to offer. 我是穆克里斯，欢迎海来 Caricarz。 Alright, so the Atto 2 here is actually known as the BYD Yuan Up in China, and the Atto 2 name is only reserved for the overseas market. And did you know that Malaysia is the first overseas right-hand drive market to get this car, officially making us one of the earliest markets in the world to actually get to drive this car? Okay, in terms of positioning, BYD positions the Atto 2 as essentially a smaller subcompact B-segment SUV version of the Atto 3, where it sits below the Atto 3. And in terms of design, I would say it's got a very clean and borderline safe design, typical of fashion of any SUVs. Okay, let's start at the front part where BYD described this as a dragon face. Well, what's so dragon about it? I'm not sure, but it comes with this full LED headlights, a grilleless front end with BYD badge, and on the bottom part, of course, it comes with this wide air intake with actual functional side vents. Overall, from one glance, you can see the Atto 2 at the front here looks quite similar to the Seal 6 EV, don't you think? Right, from the side, you can see that the design of the Atto 2 is quite conventional because it features this squared-off roof design. But one thing I want to highlight actually is on the side mirror here because it comes with this NFC reader where you can use the smart key card that's given by BYD, but you can also just connect your car to a smartphone so you can unlock your car using your mobile phone. It's quite easy. But other than that, other design bits from here, including this plastic underbody cladding, you got this semi-flush door handles, and in terms of wheels, it comes with this multi-spoke 70-inch alloy wheels, which is quite small for this kind of car, but it's good because you don't need to spend too much to change the tires on your Atto 2. And at the back, you get interesting design bits including roof-mounted spoiler, full-width LED taillights with this Mobius ring infinity design that looks very nice and very stunning. And the rear bumper garnish and accent is quite aggressive because this overall is a crossover SUV. But one thing you notice about the badge is actually it writes Atto 2, but at one glance you can read it as Atto because the car's so good they decided to name it twice. Right, once you get inside the cabin of Atto 2, you'll notice that the cabin looks a bit more mature somehow because gone are those funky two-tone colors, guitar strings on the door cards that we saw on the Atto 3, and instead you get this more simplistic, more minimalistic, and definitely nicer looking cabin setup. And okay, the premiumness comes with terms of the material user because on the front dash here, on the door cards, everything is been wrapped in this soft touch materials, which elevates the whole life experience inside this rather affordable car. Okay, in terms of tech amenities, you'll get this large central 12-point-inch infotainment screen that can be rotatable just like any other screens on the Atto, and it supports wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay from a get-go, as well as built-in software like streaming services like YouTube, Spotify, and you can even go karaoke in this car just like any other BYD models out there. You also get a smaller 8-point-inch digital meter cluster with multiple selectable modes so that you can play around with this small screen as well. Okay, other amenities here, including the two front seats here, this is like the sporty front seats. They are not only powered but also ventilated. Imagine 100,000 ringgit car with ventilated seats. What's not to like? And it's wrapped in this rather plush synthetic leather material that really feels quite nice and premium. Okay, one thing I like about BYD EVs, particularly the Atto 2, is that they don't really like to take the Tesla route where they want to simplify their cabin and everything needs to control by the infotainment. Not for BYD. They still retain lots of physical controls, including for the side mirror change here. You also got buttons on the steering wheel here, as well as buttons on the center console, including one to change the driving mode and even one to change the intensity of your regenerative braking function. Okay, other amenities include 50-watt wireless charging pad. That's quite nice to see. You got multiple USB charging ports. But that said, this being a rather affordable car, you also got some a bit of shortcomings. For example, you got no panoramic sunroof, which I think is a good thing because Malaysia is hot, ladies and gentlemen. You also got a very simplistic ambient light system. It's not as fancy as those you've seen in other EVs out there. And another thing is that it only comes with the standard 8-speaker sound system, no brand whatsoever. But overall, I think all the shortcomings are just very minute. For just 100,000 ringgit, you get this very well equipped cabin. What's not to like? Right, folks, life at the back seat of the Atto 2, despite its rather compact size, is quite spacious, dare I say, surprisingly spacious, because, okay, the front seat has been adjusted to my driving position, and you can see I'm 175 cm tall. I still got plenty of legroom, and headroom is quite ample because of the square-off roof design. Okay, in terms of amenities, so it's not too bad. You got single rear AC vent here, and at least you got 2 USB charging ports, one Type A, one Type C. Okay, in terms of seat, it uses the same synthetic leather upholstery as the front one, but thanks to it underpinning a dedicated EV platform, you can see the floor is almost flat, allowing 3 adults to sit at the back in a relatively comfortable manner. So overall, practicality is quite surprising in this rather small car. Okay, in terms of boot space, also quite decent. You got 380 liters of boot space as standard and can be expandable to over 1,320 liters once you folded down the rear seats. But unfortunately, this being a front-wheel drive car, it does not come with a frunk. Right, one good thing about BYD cars is that the engine bay is quite exposed, where you can actually see the actual motor here, where the Atto 2 here is powered by a single front-mounted motor setup. As a result, you don't have space for frunk, where this motor outputs about 174 horsepower and 219 Nm of torque, which is good enough for a 0 to 100 time in about 7.9 seconds and a top speed of 160 kilometers per hour. Not bad. And just like many other BYD EVs in Malaysia, the Atto 2 here underpins the same e-Platform 3.0 setup as other EVs, where it uses a 400-volt battery architecture. Okay, the battery pack for the Atto 2 here is rated at 51.13 kWh. It's just use the same BYD Blade LFP proprietary battery pack that BYD claims to be good enough for up to 350 kilometers of WLTP maximum range. Okay, in terms of charging, it supports 7 kilowatt AC, where DC is kept higher at 82 kilowatt, allowing this car to charge from 30 to 80% in about 28 minutes, which is just enough time for you to have your lunch somewhere in the arena. Right, so in case you're wondering how this 100,000 ringgit EV drive, well, good news, it's quite nice because, of course, for starters, it's a small EV, so even with a single motor rated at 174 horsepower, it's more than enough to power up this car. But one thing I want to highlight is actually how surprisingly nice the driving dynamics are, because, like I said, it's a small EV, it's a relatively light, not as heavy as those big EVs, SUVs, so it feels quite nimble and sharp around corners. Of course, you still get some body rolls and everything because it's still a tall riding SUV at the end of the day, but the fact that you can just drive this car rather confidently, especially easing through traffic and even on twisties and B roads, is quite nice to have. And of course, 174 horsepower and 290 Nm of torque is more than enough for this size of a car. Like I said, you can just challenge any other combustion cars in its segment. Okay, other than that, in terms of comfort, I would say this car sits almost perfectly in the middle, because most Chinese EVs, they tend to get a bit too soft on the suspension tuning, but not this car. It's just quite fine. It's not too stiff like a sports car, but at the same time, it's not too wobbly. But of course, you don't expect it to be as sporty as something like the Smart #1 Brabus, but it's still a nice car and an enjoyable drive you can experience from it. And the age is okay. The tires are surprisingly quite well, although this Chinese brand tire is quite decent. But the wind separations could have been just a bit better, especially once you go above 100 kilometers per hour. Okay, more importantly, when you're buying an EV, of course, when it comes to range, because like I said, BYD claims you can get up to 350 km of WLTP range, provided that you will get to its claimed energy consumption, which is 14 kilowatt hour per 100 kilometers. Well, good news, after spending a few days this car driving around cities and whatnot, I managed to get around 15 kilowatt hour per 100 km, which is quite efficient. I mean, it's a small car at the end of the day, but goes to show that it's quite possible for you to reach the claimed WLTP range from city driving and even some slight long distance driving. So overall, drive dynamics is quite surprisingly quite decent. EV range is quite okay. It's quite an effective energy consumption. Is quite good for this size of a car. So what's there to complain? Alright, when it comes to safety, you would expect a 100,000 ringgit car doesn't come with that much of ADAS function. Well, let me tell you, you're wrong, because the Atto 2 is brimmed with almost ADAS function that you can think of. For example, you got adaptive cruise control with smart follow function, adaptive emergency, autonomous emergency braking, lane keeping assist, lane departure warning, the works. Okay, most of them works quite well, but fortunately, I don't have to use all of them because I might not be staying alive. But the low speed function on the ACC works quite well, especially in traffic jams. But if you go to the list of the others, there's only one jarring function that's not available in this car, which is blind spot detection, which is quite weird to see because, I mean, understandable because it's a relatively small car, so you don't really need to use that function very much. But with that function it's not available, you need to pay attention on your side mirrors more often. But other than that, passive safety is quite complete. You also got electronic parking brake, hill distance control and everything that works. And for parking, it comes with a 360 camera view. And this being a relatively small car with a tall ride height, so your chances of bending through curbs are getting lesser than ever. So meaning that parking this car shouldn't be a big problem for you. But of course, this being an EV, you've got no space, unfortunately, for a spare wheel, but at least you got TPMS system with a tire repair kit. So in case there's a small leak, you can just detect it right away and just call your towing service for whatnot. But overall, ADAS function is quite usable, although it's not the best I've tested, obviously, but it's there. The omission of BSD is quite weird, but understandable. So again, what's there to complain? Right, folks, after spending a few days with the BYD Atto 2 here, I certainly think that this EV SUV has more than it takes to just become a no-frills, no-gimmick, first ever affordable EV, because at its affordable price tag of just 100,000 ringgit flat, you'll get a very nice car with decent and safe but yet very nice looking exterior design, well-equipped interior with surprisingly spacious and practicality edge, decent driving dynamics with enough range for you to use it as a daily driver or a commuter, and comprehensive safety features. What's not to like about this car, honestly? And for those reasons, I certainly think that the BYD Atto 2 here with its relatively affordable price of 100,000 ringgit is probably the best BYD products ever sold by BYD cars here in Malaysia. Okay, off top of that prices, you also get warranty packages include a 6-year warranty package for the vehicle and 8 years warranty package for both the battery and the motor control unit system. So what's not to like if you're looking for an EV? This is the best first EV you can think of. But even if you look for a second car, a daily commute, a towner car, this is also a perfect choice for you.